Nick Park here from Evangelical Alliance Ireland, and I have to say to you that today it is as an act of faith, not of feeling, that I declare it is Friday, but Sunday's coming. I believe that God has better days ahead for His church. You know, as I'm standing here in this empty church building, at an hour whenever most decent people are asleep in bed, I'm here praying for God's people. As a pastor, I'm praying for the church that I lead. And I think, like almost everybody watching this video, there's a cry from my heart saying, God, I want to see it like it was before. I want us to get back to where we were. I want to see this building filled to overflowing again several times on a Sunday. I want to see it filled with people worshiping together, singing together, dancing together. When people are hurting, others are coming and putting their arms around them and comforting them. People spending, so much time after church talking and fellowshipping and huddled together in prayer that I'm having to switch the lights on and off because I want to lock the doors and go home, and nobody seems to want to go home. I'm longing for that again. Now, this week, as part of my work with Evangelical Alliance, I have been in an exchange of communication, both email and telephone, with the Taoiseach's office. And I am convinced of one thing. I'm convinced that our government wants to see churches open safely and soon. Exactly what we are asking for as Christians. And I believe that is what they want. I don't believe there's some government conspiracy to close the churches. I don't believe that the government is in hock with a lot of other people to just try to keep us all in fear. I believe, and I accept at face value what they say, and I believe it, that the government desires to see churches open, that the government sees church as an important function that is vital to so many people's lives, and they want it to open up. Maybe not as strongly as I do, but they want to see the churches opened up. Well, I do believe that they are going to make that happen, and I do believe, I'm very optimistic, that we can see our churches opened again. Not the way we would love to see them be opened if there was no pandemic, still with the distancing and everything else, but at least being able to meet together as the people of God, even if there are restrictions and safety measures. I do believe that we can see that happening earlier than was originally projected by the government's different levels. And for that to happen, of course, we've got a part to play as well. You know, part of the problem here is a very real fear that places of worship can become sources of infection. And we've not seen it in our country, but we've seen in other countries churches become super spreaders. And now that's not because church is inherently dangerous. Of course it's not. You know, the fact is that that we take safety measures to protect us against dangers in every area of life. As you can see, I've got the church lights on here. I've got the stage lights on and the colored spotlights and everything else. Why? Because when I was here praying for the church, I didn't want it to feel like a dead, empty space. I wanted it to feel like a living room that's comforting and inviting and just waiting for the people to step back into it after a short absence. But you know, all this electricity that we have in this building, and there's a lot of electricity because I know every time I see the electricity bills every week for this church, or every month when we get our electric bills, sometimes oh my goodness, we use that much? But all this electricity is dangerous. You know, electricity kills. Now, we are people of faith. But that doesn't mean that we just have bare electrical cables hanging out of the walls and say, oh, well, God will protect us because we're people of faith. We take the precautions. And because we take the precautions, we know that the place is safe. You know, people don't walk into this church on a Sunday and look at all the lights and say, oh my goodness, there's all this electricity in this place. Am I safe here? No. We deal with the inherent risk involved with electricity by making it safe. And I do believe this, that as churches open again, we have a responsibility upon us to do so safely. Now, when we take safety measures, you're not going to please everybody. You know what, people? There are people who would want you to take more. There are people who would want you to take less. But I do believe that we have a responsibility, those of us in church leadership have a responsibility that if the government will make a move to actually allow churches to open sooner than was originally planned, then we have a part to play as well in making church as safe as we've told the government it is. I do believe that means we don't just grudgingly follow the minimum that we can get away with in safety measures without getting in trouble with the authorities. We need to go above and beyond. We need to take every step we can to ensure that when people set foot in a church, they are safer in church than they are in the shopping center or anywhere else where they're going to be that day or the next day or the rest of the week. We have a holy responsibility for God's people. And I do believe that the church will rise up and fulfill that responsibility. I believe it is time for the church to rise up. Now, when we talk about the church rising up, that's a phrase that always makes my heart beat with excitement, because I see in Scripture that the church is supposed to be more than what we currently see. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 14, it says, "Wake up, sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine upon you." It's time for the church to rise up. In Romans chapter 8, verses 18 and 19, the Apostle Paul says, "I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. For the creation waits in eager expectation for the sons of the children of God to be revealed." So the world, not just this old pastor, but the world is waiting for the church to rise up. And so whenever I hear people saying it's time for the church to rise up, oh, there's an excitement fills my chest. But so often that excitement is followed by disappointment, because the rising up that they then talk about is talking about protecting our own rights and privileges, or is talking about supporting a political agenda, or is talking about winning another culture war fight to try to turn the clock back in society. I believe the church needs to rise up. And I believe one of the biggest tragedies will be that with the vaccinations that are getting into production, we can see light at the end of this coronavirus tunnel. But I have a worrying concern that we will come out the end of the coronavirus epidemic without having learned the lesson that we needed to learn in it, because God teaches us lessons even in difficult circumstances. I believe the church has got to rise up, and in these remaining time that this pandemic is still with us, the church needs to rise up, not to protect our own privileges, not to get involved in partisan politics, but we need to rise up with a Christ-like holiness and live in a way and speak in a way and act in a way that makes us demonstrably different from the world around us. We need to rise up in radical compassion and love for others, for every human being, including the unborn child, including the immigrant, including the person who is being racially abused. The church needs to rise up in radical compassion and love. We need to rise up with a passionate sharing of the gospel. We can't afford to sit back and say we can't really share Christ with too many people this Christmas because of all these restrictions. But we need to work out ways that we can safely and winningly and wonderfully share the gospel of Jesus Christ with more people this Christmas than any previous year. We need to rise up in prayer. You know, as a pastor, this is not a mega church that I pastor. Before the pandemic, on a good Sunday, we would have about 400 people in this place. It's a decent-sized church. It's certainly not a mega church. And you know, for a long time, we've had a vision for 24/7 prayer. And we've always wanted to do that, and we've never quite managed it. And I've often said, you know, maybe we need to wait till we're a bit bigger. You know, when we have a few more hundred people, we'll have enough people to sustain 24/7 prayer. Can I tell you something? When this pandemic really hit and we began to understand the extent of it, we began to pray. That was back on St. Patrick's Day in March, and the members of this church have been praying ever since, non-stop, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's one church. And every day, I look at that prayer rota where the people sign up online to fill out their hour of prayer. And I'm amazed at the names I see, and I tell you, I pray for each one of those names, and I look at these people who get up in the early hours of the morning to fulfill their hour of prayer. It's become a regular routine in my house that I will be dog tired, and I want to tell you, at this time of this pandemic, I am more tired than I can ever remember being in my life. But I tell you, there's times when I'm fast asleep in bed in the middle of the night and I hear my wife's alarm going off and she's up out of bed and she's into the kitchen to pray for her hour. That's become part of our routine in our home and in many homes in the church. Why? Because the church needs to rise up and pray as never before. Because prayer changes things. We need to be praying for our government. Not just praying that they'll allow the churches to open. If that's all we're praying for our government, then we are failing them. We need to be praying that God will guide them to make great and good decisions, and even innovative decisions that will negotiate this nation through this pandemic. We need to pray for those in authority. And we need to pray for our nation whenever so many people are suffering effects of isolation and mental health. And we need to pray against this virus. We need to pray for a divine intervention, not just once, but again and again and again on a daily basis. Oh, it's time for the church to rise up. And if we get to the end of this pandemic and things go back to business as usual without rising up in this way, then not only have we endured a national trial, a worldwide trial, a global time of trouble, but we will have gone through it without even learning the greatest lesson that God wanted us to learn. That it's time for the church to really rise up. And that creation waits in eager expectation for the church of God to be revealed, the children of God to be revealed. It's like the world is standing on tiptoe, looking over the heads of the crowd, saying, now will I see the church that the Bible speaks about. I want to be part of that church. It is the vision of Evangelical Alliance for the church in Ireland to be that kind of church. May God help us to do that. May God sustain us and strengthen us. And don't lose heart. Because sometimes you might not feel like it, and you might have to declare it by faith, as I'm having to do in this freezing, cold, empty building at a time when everybody else is lying in bed. But we have to declare, it might be Friday, but Sunday's coming.